We are going to start fourth part of our Harry Potter series. So let's begin with Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Chapter 1. The Riddle House. The villagers of Little Hangleton still call it the Riddle House, even though it had been many years since the Riddle family had lived there. It stood on a hill overlooking the village, some of its windows boarded, tile missing from its roof, and ivy spreading unchecked over its face. Once a neat-looking manor, and easily the largest and grandest building for miles around. The Riddle House was now damp, derelict, and unoccupied. The little Angleton all agreed that the old house was creepy. Half a century ago, something strange and horrible had happened there. Something that the older inhabitants of the village still liked to discuss when topic for gossip were scarce. The story had been picked over so many times and had been embroidered in so many places that nobody was quite sure that the truth was anymore. Every version of the tale, however, started in the same place 50 years before. At daybreak on a summer morning, when the Riddle house had still been well kept and impressive, a maid had entered the drawing room too, and all three riddles stayed. The maid had run screaming down the hill into the village and roused as many people as she could, lying there with their eyes wide open, cold as ice, still in their dinner thing. The police were summoned, and the whole of Little Hangleton had seethed with shocked curiosity and ill-discussed excitement. Nobody who stayed there pretended to feel very sad about the riddles, for they had been most unpopular. Elderly Mr. and Mrs. Riddle had been rich, snobbish, and rude, and their grown-up son, Tom, had been, if anything worse. All the villagers cared about was the identity of their murderer. For plainly three apparently healthy people did not all drop dead of natural cause on the same night. The hanged man, the village pub, did a roaring trade that night. The whole village seemed to have turned out to discuss the murderers. They were rewarded for leaving their resides when the Riddle's cook arrived dramatically in their midst and announced to the suddenly silent pub that a man called Frank Bryce had just been arrested. Frank, cried several people. Never. Frank Breer was the Riddle's gardener. He lived alone in the run-down cottage on the ground of the Riddle house. Frank had come back from the war with a very stiff leg and a great dislike of crowds and lots of noise, and had been working for the Riddles ever since. There was a rush to buy the cooked drink and hear more details. Anyway, thought he was odd. She told the eagerly listening villagers after her fourth sherry, unfriendly like, I'm sure if I have offered him once, I have offered it 100 times, never wanted to mix, he didn't. Now, said a woman at the bar, he had a hard word, Frank. He likes the quiet life, that's no reason to. Who else had a key to the black door then? Darkened the cook. There has been a spare key hanging in the gardener cottage far back as I can remember. Nobody forced the door last night, no broken windows. All Frank had to do was creep up the big house while we was all sleeping. The villagers exchanged dark look. I always thought he had a nasty look about him, right enough grunt a man at bar. What turned him funny? If you ask me, said me, like to get on the wrong side of Frank, didn't I do? Said an excited woman in the corner. Horrible temper, said Don, nodding favorably. I remember when he was a kid. By the following morning, hardly anyone in a little Hangleton doubted that Frank Bryce had killed the Riddles. But over in the neighboring town of Great Hangleton, in the dark and diggy police station, Frank was stubbornly repeating again and again that he was innocent, and that the only person he had seen near the house on the day of the Riddle's death had been a teenage boy, a stranger, dark haired and pale. Nobody else in the village had seen any such boy, and the police were quite sure that Frank had invented him. Just then, things were looking very serious for Frank. The report on the Riddle's body came back and changed everything. The police had never read an order report. A team of doctors had examined the bodies and had concluded that none of the Riddle had been poisoned, stabbed, shot, strangled, suffocated, or harmed at all. In fact, the Riddle all appeared in to be a perfect health. Apart from the fact that they were all dead, the doctor did not that each of the Riddle had a look of terror upon her face. But as the frustrated police said, whoever heard of three people being frightened to death, as there was no proof that the Riddle had been murdered at all. The police were forced to let Frank go. The Riddle were buried in the Little Hangles churchyard, and their grave remained objects of curiosity for a while. To everyone's surprise and aimed a cloud of suspicion, Frank Bryce returned to his cottage on the ground of the Riddle house. So far as I'm concerned, he killed them, and I don't care what the police say, said Dot in the hanged man. And if he had any decency, he had lived here, knowing as how we know he did. But Frank did not leave. He stayed to tend the garden for the next family who lived in the Riddle's house, and then the next, for neither family stayed long. Perhaps it was partly because of Frank that the new owner said there was a nasty feeling about the place, which, in the absence of inhabitants, started to fall into disappear. The wealthy man who owned the Riddle house these days neither lived there nor put it to use it. They said in the village that he kept it for tax reasons, though nobody was very clear what these might be. The wealthy owner continued to pay Frank to do the gardening. However, Frank was nearing his 77th birthday now, very deep and bad legs stiff than ever, but could be seen pottering around the flat's bed in neither weather. Even though the weeds were starting to creep up on him, he might to suppress them. They were not the only thing Frank had to contend with either. Boys from the village made a habit of throwing stones through the windows of Riddle's house. They rode their bicycle over the lawns. Frank worked so hard to keep it smooth. Once or twice they broke into the old house for a dare. They knew that all Frank's devotion to the house and grounds amounted almost to an obsession, and it amused them to see him limping across the garden, brandishing his stick and yelling croakily at them. Frank, for his part, believed the boys tormented him because they liked their parents and grandparents, thought him a murderer. So when Frank woke one night in August and saw something very odd up at the old house, he merely assumed that the boys had gone one step further in their attempts to punish him. It was Frank's bad leg that woke him. It was paining him worse than ever in his old age. He got up and limped downstairs into the kitchen with the idea of railing his hot water bottle to ease the stiffness in his knees. Standing at the sink, lying the kettle, he looked up at the Riddle house and saw light glimmering in its upper window. Frank knew at once what was going on. The boys had broken into the house again, and judging by the flickering quality of the light, they had started Frank had no telephone, and in any case, he had deeply mistreated the police ever since they had taken him in for question about Riddle's death. He put down the kettle at once, hurried back upstairs as fast as his bad leg would allow, and was soon back in his kitchen, fully dressed and removing a rusty old key from his hook by the door. Up his walking stick, which was propped against the wall, and set off into the night. The front door of the Riddle house bore no sign of being forced, nor did any of the windows. Frank limped around to the back of the house until he reached the door almost completely hidden by ivy. Took out the old key, put it into the lock, and opened the door noiselessly. He let himself into the Carnot's kitchen. Frank had not entered it for many years, nevertheless, although it was very dark. He remembered where the door into the hall was, and he groped his way toward it, his nostrils full of smell of decay, ear pricked for any sound of footsteps or voices from overhead. He reached the hall, which was a little lighter owing to the larger Mylon windows on either side of the front door, and started to climb the stairs, blessing the dust and light, thinking upon the stone because it muffled the sound of his feet and stick. On the landing, Frank turned right and saw at once where the introducer were. At the very end of the passage, a door stood ajar, and a flickering light shone through the gap, casting a long silver of gold across the black floor. Frank edged closer and closer, grasping his walking stick grimly. Several feet from the entrance, he was able to see a narrow slice of the room beyond. There he saw had been lit in the grate. This surprised him. Then he stopped moving and listening intently, for a man's voice spoke within the room. It sounded timid and fearful. There is a little more in the bottle, my lord, if you are still hungry. Later, said a second voice. This too belonged to a man, but it was strangely high pitched and cold as a sudden blast of icy wind. Something about that voice made the sparse hair on the back of Frank's neck stand up. Move me closer to Wormtail. Frank turned his right ear toward the door and better to hear. There came the click of bottle being put down upon some hard surface, and then the dull scraping noise of heavy chair being dragged across the floor. Frank caught a glimpse of a small man, his back to the door, pushing the chair into place. He was wearing a long black cloak, and there was a black patch at the back of his head. Then he went out of sight again. Where is Nagini? Said the cold voice. I don't know, my lord, said the second voice nervously. She set out to explore the house, I think. You will milk her before we retired, Wormtail, said the second voice. I will need feeding in the night. The journey has tired me greatly. Brow furrowed. Frank inclined his good ear still closer to the door, listening very hard. There was a pause, and then the man called Wormtail spoke again. My lord, may I ask how long we are going to stay here? A week, said the cold voice. Perhaps longer. The place is moderately comfortable, and the plan cannot proceed yet. It would be foolish to act before the World Cup is over. Frank inserted a lanyard into his ear and roared it, owing no doubt to build up and earwax. He had heard the word which was not a word at all. The which World Cup, my lord, said Wormtail. Forgive me, but I do not understand why should we wait until the World Cup is over. Because, fool, at this very moment wizards are pouring into the country from all over the world, and every meddler from the Ministry of Magic will be on duty, on the watch for sign of or unusual activity, checking and doubling checking identities. They will be obsessed with security lest the muggle notice anything. So we wait. Frank stopped trying to clear out his ear. He had distantly heard the word Ministry of Magic, Wizards, and Muggles. Plainly each of these expressions meant something secret, and Frank could think of only two sort of people who could speak in courts, spies and criminals. Frank tightened his hold on his walking stick once more and listened more closely still. Your lordship is still determined then? Wormtail said quietly. Certainly I am determined, Wormtail. There was a note of menace in the cold voice now. A slight pause followed, and then Wormtail spoke, the word tumbling from him in a rush as though he was forcing himself to say this before he lost his nerve. It could be done without Harry Potter, my lord. Another pause, more protracted, and then, without Harry Potter, breathed the second voice softly. I see. My lord, I do not say this out of concern for the boy, said Wormtail, his voice rising squeakily. The boy is nothing to me, nothing at all. It is merely that if we were to use another witch or wizard, any wizard, the thing could be done so much more quickly. If you allow me to leave you for a short while, you know that I can distinguish myself most effectively. I could be back here in a little as 2 days with a suitable person. I could use another wizard, said the cold voice softly. That is true. My lord, it makes sense, said Wormtail, sounding thoughtfully relieved now. Laying hand on Harry Potter would be so difficult. He is so well protected. And so you volunteered to go and fetch me a substitute. I wonder, perhaps the task of nursing me had become wearisome of you, Wormtail. Will this suggestion of outdoing the plant be nothing more than an attempt to desert me? My lord, I have no wish to leave you, none at all. Do not lie to me, hissed the second voice. I can always tell Wormtail. You are regretting that you ever returned to me. I revolt you. I see you flinch when you look at me. Feel you shudder when I touch me. Know my devotion to your lordship. Your devotion is nothing more than cowardice. You will not be here if you had anywhere else to go. How I am to survive without you when I need feeding every few hours. Who is the to milk Nagini? But you seem too much stronger, my lord. Liar, repeated the second voice. I am no stronger, and a few days alone will be enough to rob me to the little health I have regained under your clumsy care. Silence. Cocktail, who had been sputtering incoherently, fell silent at once. For a few seconds, Frank could hear nothing but the reclacking. Then the second man spoke once more in a whisper that was almost a hiss. I have my reason for using the boy. As I have already explained to you, and I will use no other. I have waited 13 years. A few more months will make no difference. As for the protection surrounded the boy, I believe my plan will be effective. All that is needed is a little courage from you, Wormtail. Courage you will, and unless you wish to feel and full extent of Lord Voldemort's wrath. My lord, I must speak, said Wormtail, panic in his voice now. All through our journey, I have gone over the plain in my head. My lord, Bretha Joking disappearance will not go unnoticed for long, and if we proceed, if I murder, if, whispered the second voice, if you follow the plan, Wormtail, the ministry need never know that anyone else has died. You will do it quickly and without fuss. I only wish that I could do it myself. But in my present condition, come, Wormtail, one more death, and our path to Harry Potter is clear. I'm not asking you to do it alone. By the time my faithful servant will have rejoined us. I am a faithful servant, said Wormtail, the merest trace of sulkiness in his voice. Wormtail, I need somebody with brains, somebody whose loyalty has never wavered, and you, unfortunately, full neither requirement. I found you, said Wormtail, and there was deniedly a sulky edge to his voice. I was the one who found you. I brought you bird choking. That is true, said second man, sounding amused. A stroke of brilliance I would not have thought possible from you, Wormtail. Though, if truth be told, you were not aware how useful she would be when you caught her, were you? I thought she might be useful, my lord. Liar, said the second voice again, the cruel amusement more pronounced than ever. However, I do not deny that her information was invaluable. Without it, I could never have formed our plan, and for that you will have your reward. Wormtail, I will allow you to perform an essential task for me, one that many of my followers would give their right hand to perform. Really, my lord, what? Wormtail sounded teary again. Wormtail, you don't want me to spoil the surprise. Your part will come at the very end, but I promise you, you will have the honor of being just as useful as Bertha Jorkin. Wormtail's voice suddenly sounded hard as though his mouth had gone very dry. You are going to kill me too. Wormtail, Wormtail, said the cold voice sickly. Why would I kill you? I killed Bertha because I had to. She was too for nothing after my questioning, quite useless. In any case, awkward question would have been asked if she had gone back to the ministry with the news that she had met you on her holiday visit, who were supposed to be dead. Would do we not to run into Ministry of Magic witches at wayside inns? Wormtail muttered something so quietly that Frank could not hear it. It made the second man laugh, as entirely mirthless laugh, cold as his speech could have modified her memory, but memory charm can be broken by the powerful wizard. As I provoke when I question her, it would be an insult to her memory not to use the information I extracted from her. Wormtail, out in the corridor, Frank suddenly became aware that the hand gripped his walking stick was slippery with sweat. The man with the cold voice had killed a woman. He was talking about it without any kind of remorse. With amusement, he was dangerous, a madman, and he was planning more murders. The boy Harry Potter, whoever he was in danger. Frank knew what he must do. Now, if ever was the time to go to the police, he would creep out of the house and head straight for the telephone box in the village. But the cold voice was speaking again, and Frank remained where he was, froze to the spot, listening with all his might. One more murder, my faithful servant at Hogwarts. Harry Potter, as good as mine. Wormtail, it is decided there will be no more argument, but quite, I think I hear Nagini. And the second man's voice changed. He started making noise such as Frank had never heard before. He was hissing and spitting without drawing breath. Frank thought he must be having some sort of seizure, and then Frank heard movement behind him in the dark passageway. He turned to look and found himself paralyzed with fright. Something was slithering toward him along the dark corridor floor, and as it drew nearer to the silver or of red light, he realized with a thrill of terror that it was giant snake, at least 12 feet long, horrid, transexed. Frank stared as its undulating body cut a wide curving track through the thick dusk on the floor, coming closer and closer. That was he to do. The only means of escape was into the room where two men sat plotting murder. Yet if he stayed where he was, the snake would surely kill him. But before he had made his decision, the snake was level with him, and then, incredibly, miraculously, it was passing. It was following the spitting, hissing noise made by the cold voice behind the door, and in a second, the tip of its diamond patterned tail had vanished through the gap. There was a sweat on Frank's forehead now, and the hand on the walking stick was trembling inside the room. The cold voice was counting to his, and Frank was visiting by the strange idea, an impossible idea. This man could talk to snake. Frank didn't understand what was going on. He wanted more than anything to be back in his bed with his hot water bottle. The problem was that his leg didn't seem to want to move. As he stood there, shaking and trying to master himself, the cold voice switched abruptly to English again. Nagini has interesting news, Wormtail, it said. Indeed, my lord, said Wormtail. Indeed, yes, said the voice. According to Nagini, there is an old muggle standing right outside this room listening to every word we say. Frank didn't have a chance to hide himself. There were footsteps, and then the door of the room was flung wide open. A short, balding man with a graying hair, a pointed nose, and a small, watery eyes stood before Frank, a mixture of fear and alarm in his face. Invite him inside, Wormtail. Where are your manners? The cold voice was coming from the ancient armchair before the rear, but Frank couldn't see the speaker. The snake, on the other hand, was curled up on the rotting hearthrug like some horrible travesty of a pet dog. Wormtail beckoned Frank into the room. Though still deeply shaken, Frank took a rammer grim upon his walking stick and glimpsed over the threshold. The reeve was the only source of light in the room. It cast long, spidery shadow upon the wall. Frank started at the back of the armchair. The man inside it seemed to be ever smaller than his servant, so Frank couldn't even see the back of his head. You heard anything, Muggle? Said the cold voice. What's that you're calling me? Said Frank defiantly. For now that he was inside the room, now that the time had come for some sort of action, he felt braver. It had always been so in the war. I am calling you a muggle, said the very cold voice. It means that you are not a wizard. I do not know what you mean by wizard, said Frank, his voice growing steadier. All I know is I have heard enough to interest the police tonight. You have done murder and you are planning more. And I'll tell you to do this too, he added on a sudden impression. My wife know I am up here, and if I don't come back, you have no wife, said the cold voice very quietly. Nobody knows you are here. You told nobody that you were coming. Do not lie to Lord Voldemort, Muggle, for he knows he always knows. Is that right? Said Frank roughly. Lord, is it? Well, I don't think much of your manner, my lord. Turn around and face me like a man. Why don't you? But I am not a man, Muggle, said the cold voice, barely audible now over the cracking of the flame. I am much, much more than a man. However, why not? I will face you, Wormtail. Come, turn my chair around. The servant gave a whisper. You heard me, Wormtail. Slowly, with his face screwed up as though he would rather have done anything than approach his master and a rug where the snake lay. The small man walked forward and began to turn the chair. The snake lifted its ugly triangular head and hissed slightly as the legs of the chair smoothed on its rug, and then the chair was facing Frank, and he saw what was sitting in it. His walking stick fell on the floor with a clatter. He opened his mouth and let out a scream. He was screaming so loud that he ever heard the word the thing in the chair spoke. As it raised a wand, there was a flash of green light, a rushing sound, and Frank Breer crumbled. He was dead before he hit the floor. 200 miles away, the boy called Harry Potter woke with a start. That's it for today. Stay tuned for next. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.